Treasure Planet is a 2002 animated movie that Disney prefers to not talk about, it seems. And I'm not sure why. The mix of 18th century aesthetic and sci-fi is cool, it has good writing and pacing, animation is great, it's a really solid film. Maybe nothing special, given that it is another adaptation of Treasure Island, just in space. But it's a fun flick. Treasure Planet, however, has bombed in theaters, and so Disney buried it before turning it into a franchise, but not before making a bunch of video game tie-ins. And yes, this is a situation where PlayStation 1, 2, Game Boy Advance and PC each got their separate, absolutely different game based on the movie. This sort of stuff happened a lot back in the day. And now we're going to take a look at Treasure Planet for PlayStation 2, developed by Bizarre Creations. As always, we'll do so with the help of my Stasocritic scoring system. My name is Stanislav Costiuc, I am a game designer, and this is my review of Disney's Treasure Planet for PS2. We start with design. This is the most important category of Stasocritic with the biggest weight, 4, because gameplay and structure naturally influence our experience the most. At its heart, Treasure Planet is a game about two things, jumping and collectibles. Well, there's also solar surfing, but it really is a subset of the jumping pillar. The whole game revolves around opening up new levels by collecting enough portal beacons, and each beacon requires a certain task to be completed, usually heavily involving jumping. And a bit of combat, sometimes, though I would say that fighting is not even secondary, it is tertiary to the whole experience. And that's the game. For all intents and purposes, Treasure Planet is a straightforward collectathon that's divided into on-foot and surfing segments. And I must say that initial impressions are pretty positive, actually. The levels are circular in nature, meaning that the endpoint and the beginning point are the same thing, with side paths and shortcuts here and there. This means that if you miss something and keep going, you aren't actively punished, and that's a really nice design decision right there. Each beacon requires a different task to be completed, and Treasure Planet tries to ensure it has variety. With the exception of 2 mission types, collecting a certain amount of doubloons and 10 pieces of green energy, every beacon is activated by a different task. You might need to chase a certain animal, destroy a number of boxes, climb somewhere, it all depends on the level. In surfing sections, you might need to grind your solar surfer towards a certain position or complete some races. Generally speaking, most of the tasks aren't complex in their setups, but the important part is that the variety is there. The core gameplay mechanics are also pretty nice. Movement is swift, jumping is comfortable, yeah sure combat is clunky and it's difficult to target enemies, but you also don't need to fight a lot anyway. The Solar Surfer feels very nice too, you have a pretty big degree of control with its sail up and down positions, allowing you to properly control your speed and do some little more advanced maneuvers like drifting when needed. Now, here's the thing. In a game like Treasure Planet, the devil lies in the details. There are games that can live perfectly well with little mechanical flaws or annoyances. But we're talking about a platformer collectathon. This game is literally all about its core mechanics, so they must be tight. But here they are not. The core is solid, but it's lacking polish, and the flaws sort of stack one on top of the other. For example, you can't control your character movement during the spin attack, and this attack keeps your movement momentum in the same direction you were going. Now, on a standard flat surface, this might make you miss enemies a couple of times, but you can live with that. However, if you're above a bottomless pit, inability to control yourself mid-spin attack can literally lead to your death. Now, remember I said how in every level one beacon is activated by collecting 10 green energy orbs? Well, whenever you fail, that amount is reset to 0, and you have to collect the orbs all over again, even if you have had a save point. Which feels inconsistent considering that the coins are properly saved with no way to lose them. And then, jumping feels nice, but when you hang on the ledge and then have to jump up, those actions are suddenly delayed a bit. Seems like a little problem, but when you need to hang on and jump on top of a crate that's constantly moving down due to your weight, this delay might prevent you from getting one of those green energy balls. The Solar Surfer overall feels nice to control, as mentioned before, but then you encounter issues like inability to properly maneuver it mid-air, which wouldn't have been a problem, but you have to try and get those coins in the air, and that slowly transforms into a matter of luck rather than skill. The surfer also has inconsistent coyote jumping capabilities. Sometimes you don't have to hover exactly above ground to jump, but sometimes it doesn't help anyway and you crash. There is a reason why initial impressions were good. The first couple levels were overall fairly straightforward, introducing to all the core concepts of the game but not trying anything complex, so you don't encounter those issues. But as levels become more elaborate, which, don't get me wrong, is great, there are some really nice things that Treasure Planet does with its level design, the mechanical flaws start popping out of the ground and gradually transform it into a quite frustrating experience. And it's fine that some of the mechanics that are in for the purposes of variety are not fully fleshed out. For example, the Solar Surfer trick system. Treasure Planet is not Tony Hawk's Solar Surfer, but it also doesn't have to be. There are only a couple tricks and performing them is a bit clunky, but failing one doesn't ruin your goals and overall it's fun and provides a nice change of pace. But then there are things like stealth segments, with unclear detection rules and patrol routes that all of a sudden change for some reason, forcing you to restart the whole segment. I actually thought that maybe Treasure Planet, given its collectathon nature, would not have stealth in it, but for some reason so many action-adventure games, of those times especially, couldn't resist putting stealth in a game not built for stealth at all. I don't know why this keeps happening. At any rate, should you open up all the possible scores for design, I will assign a 5 to Treasure Planet. Obviously, it probably had a very short development time, being a licensed title and all that, so it is understandable why mechanically the game is somewhat problematic. Had it been more polished, I would for sure assign a 6, maybe even a 7. I have to admit that due to the core gameplay flaws, I didn't delve too deep into Treasure Planet's level designs, and they might be good enough to prop the game's score up even higher. But there is also no reason to analyze levels in detail, as the more elaborate and interesting a level becomes, the more problematic and frustrating it is to play it. And that's just not great. Time to talk about context. This category has a weight of 1, as it's about things that enhance the experience rather than define it: plot, characters, motivation, etc. Treasure Planet is a coming-of-age story about Jim Hawkins trying to find the eponymous planet in an attempt to find his place in the world after his father leaves the family, on the way developing a complex relationship with John Silver, who becomes a father figure but also serves as the main antagonist. If this sounds interesting, I'm glad, but you have to watch the movie then, because you won't get anything of that in the game proper. While Treasure Planet does use footage from the animated film as cutscenes, at best it contextualizes a bit the goal of finding the treasure and at what point of the adventure you are, but even then, not always successfully. When the game ends as you try to escape the exploding Treasure Planet, the cutscene that you see after that is literally the final shots of the movie's epilogue, which have absolutely zero relation to the action you've been just doing. You won't get what is going on. The characters in the game are not as interesting or well written as they are in the movie either. There are a couple of nice background details I mentioned, but really most dialogue in the game revolves around telling you what is the next goal in a purely informational way, with little actual character to it. The animated John Silver is a complex, fascinating personality with really great lines like, "Just a lifelong obsession, Jim, I'll get over it." The video game John Silver is a person who will tell you about all the different forms your companion Morph can turn into. So, yeah, should you open up all the scores for context, I will assign a 3. You will get that this is a story about finding a treasure planet. You will also understand which characters are participating in said goal, and that's about it. Let's discuss aesthetics. This is another category with a weight of 1, as it's again about things that enhance the experience rather than define it, this time through visual style, music, etc. Everything you need to know about the game's aesthetics can be shown through this transition between the movie footage of the bright, colorful Crescentia spaceport and the game footage of the same location, which is sort of orangey-brown and drab. Or how John Silver is animated in the movie, which is an absolute marvel, and how the game itself handles this character, which is, well, not. Of course, you might say that drawing comparisons between the game and the movie is not fair and one must judge the game on its own merits. Normally, I would agree. But here's the thing, Treasure Planet positions itself as being an extension of the movie. The very first thing you see when you plop the game into your PlayStation 2 is the prologue straight from the film. This is setting up expectations. And those expectations are not met, even though yes, the quality of the environments and character animations is good. The camera work is boring, but it's a fine-looking game. But also, with some exceptions, it's really not that interesting visually. The combination of 18th century aesthetics in space are not really transferred well. It doesn't help that Treasure Planet has absolutely stellar voice acting. The whole principal cast of the movie has reprised their roles here. But given what I have said about the game's context, they really have nothing to work with and feels boring as a result. Should I open up all the scores for aesthetics, I will assign a 6. The game looks fine, the voice acting is phenomenal, but the overall aesthetic pleasure you receive is very underwhelming, let's say, due to how drab a lot of elements look in direct comparison with the animated movie footage that the game keeps comparing itself with. Now, let's move on to Cohesion. This category has a weight of 2, and it's about how well the game connects all of its different aspects together into a singular cohesive whole. As part of my scoring criteria for Cohesion, I use the word gamey quite a bit. In the context of this category though, being clearly a game is not a detriment, but when something happens just because it is a game with no other reason, can be. Treasure Planet doesn't really do a good job of recreating the film experience. It's very gamey in that sense, where it thinks about mechanics first and then applies some Treasure Planet concepts as a skin. But in this case, it leads to questions. For example, the whole structure of the game is about using beacons to open up portals between different locations. Now, in the movie, portals are a thing, but they come into play only at the very end when they're actually discovered on Treasure Planet. In the game, portals exist from the beginning, and that's how you make your way to Treasure Planet. This actively puts into question the whole premise of finding a ship and a crew and everything. Like, you literally don't need all that stuff when it is all accessed through portals anyway. Then, even in the context of the game, some things are weird. Video games use abstract notions all the time to define their goals. For example, stars in the Mario game. And you have to do certain things to collect those stars. And that's fine, it's abstract and gamey, but it doesn't raise any questions. It is what it is. Treasure Planet, though, gives a narrative layer to the beacons that open up portals. And the fact that these beacons require you to wake up some animals to be activated raises questions in the context of the overall experience. With less abstraction, it also starts to make less sense. Why would throwing these rocks down activate a beacon? No clue, they just do. You don't even see a beacon. This is why, should you open up all the scores for Cohesion, I will assign a 4. Treasure Planet is not only gamey in a sense that it's just a game with a Treasure Planet skin on it, the way how the skin layer is wrapping the experience doesn't quite make sense and leads to a lot of questions. Let's finalize our thoughts with the emotions category. This is the most subjective part of Stasocritic, but it also has the second biggest weight, 3. While it is all about purely personal feelings, they matter a lot. Now, I will be fully honest, if it were up to myself, I wouldn't have played this game in at least the following next 10 years. I did watch the Treasure Planet movie as a child in 2002, but I have literally zero memory of it. In fact, considering how unsuccessful it was, I began thinking that maybe it's just bad. But recently, YouTube has activated a feature where one can see what content gaps exist among the search terms your viewers are using. And in my case, close to the top of that list was Treasure Planet for PS2. So I figured, might as well test it out. First things first though, I have rewatched the movie because I need to have some proper context about the games. I was actually positively surprised by how much I liked it. Treasure Planet is a really good movie. Not a masterpiece, but really fun and of solid quality, definitely not worth being thrown into the Disney graveyard. They had products of much lower quality turned into franchises, but I digress. Then I got into the PS2 game, and again at the beginning, and you know why only at the beginning, I was also very positively surprised and thought that this would be a nice little licensed title I would have some fun with. And I did have fun. But eventually I just couldn't get past all the frustrations that I would meet on the way, and there was just nothing that would inspire me to keep going. I actually didn't finish Treasure Planet despite its short length, only half of it. I watched the second half on YouTube to make sure that I don't miss anything important for my arguments in the video, and that's about it. Not planning to get back into the game, and this review will serve as my lasting memory of it. I will definitely check other versions of Treasure Planet at one point, as now I am curious how they would compare. But when it comes to the PS2 version of Treasure Planet, I will assign a 6 to emotions. I had some nice couple of hours and don't regret trying the game out, but it's not really something that hooked me in any way. But let's be fair, the frustrations I had weren't anger-inducing, so at least there's that. Let's summarize everything now. After all scores and their weights are taken into account, Treasure Planet for PlayStation 2 gets a final Stasocritic rating of 45. It's definitely not a bad game, but it's a licensed game, in the most neutral sense of that phrase. You'll get the most out of it only if you like the license it is based on. Ultimately, Treasure Planet is inoffensive despite its flaws. It's a relic of its time, a hastily developed action-adventure movie tie-in, but it's also enjoyable. And if unlike me, you can live with some of the more frustrating aspects of the experience, you can have fun with this title if this genre is your cup of tea. It might definitely positively surprise you. But also, there's nothing special enough in it to force yourself to go through the game if you're not sure about it. It's okay, but not something you will miss should you skip out.